bad.
What's up, everybody? Another episode of Ropo Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Varendas, also known as Ricky Varendas, and today we have a great episode for you. Today we have The Filmmakers from a great documentary. It's currently available on Amazon Prime, so please check it out while it's still available for free if you're a Prime member. It's called The Big Secret, and it goes into the history of how and why medicine has become chemically based. And now the focus of medicine is symptom management, and it's not about curing the disease. It's not about trying to increase the strength of your immune system and all that other stuff, and the financial gain and keeping things the way that things are now, the financial gain in keeping us sick, and symptom management, and why things that used to be considered medicine, like root extracts and foods and teas and all this stuff that now is kind of not looked at as medicine. Why is that? And how did that all happen? So we get into all that with the filmmakers, Alex and Susan. We had a great conversation about all that stuff, about some current events, about everything that has to do with health, medicine, nutrition, GMOs, pesticides, so many vaccines. We talked about so many topics. So it was a great conversation. Like I said, please check out the documentary while it's still available on Amazon Prime, and I'm sure it's available on other platforms too if you don't have Amazon Prime. And also remember to support, obviously, the filmmakers that are on the show and their work. They have another film that's coming out that they talk about briefly on the show. So once that's out, I'll have them back to talk about that. And support my show if you can on Patreon. We have a Patreon page in the show descriptions. You'll find links to that and all my social media accounts. And you'll also find the links to our guests' accounts, their website, their social media accounts, all that stuff. So if you want to just connect with me or the guests, you can always go on in the show description on our YouTube channel and look at the links and connect with us if you'd like. And like I said, also support the show. If you can't support the show on Patreon, please just share the show. That goes a long way. Tweet it, post on your Facebook page, do whatever you want. Upload it on your, if you have a site or whatnot, upload it wherever you want. It's all open source, so feel free to do that. And I think that's it. Patreon, if you are considering being a Patreon member or supporter, then the perk is you get to know about all these shows prior to them being released. So all my Patreon members and supporters, they knew that when I booked this show, they knew who I was having on. They knew when I was having them on. I have another show coming up on Memorial Day. If you're a Patreon member, you know about that show. You know what it's about. You know who the guests are. It's a small little way of kind of saying thank you and giving you some behind the curtain, behind the door knowledge on what's going on behind the scenes. And there's a lot of other podcasters put out specifically Patreon shows, but the goal with this podcast is to put out these conversations and try to spread them as much as I can. So I feel like that kind of defeats the purpose. So I figured letting you guys know about shows when I book them and upcoming guests and all that stuff before anybody else does, I think that's pretty cool. So that's it. Remember to rate the show and review the show. That helps in some way, and it helps get the word out, and I guess it helps the show get suggested to other people looking for podcasts. And that's it for now. Enjoy the rest of your day, guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.
He's got 5 Emmys.
Oh, I know. He's, which is, well, let's get right into it, because this is one of the reasons why I wanted to get you guys on. One, I love the fact that Amazon Prime, unlike Netflix, it seems, isn't really restricting what they're putting on there, because it seems like I'm finding much more alternative, perspectives and documentaries on Amazon Prime than I am on other things. I know, I think recently they might have pulled Vaxxed, which was a huge issue. But your film's still on there, which I actually just was watching recently again, and some other stuff. But it does seem like at least Vaxxed was on Amazon Prime, where I don't even think Netflix would touch it. So, but I think it's an improvement, but obviously there's still some issues, because you shouldn't be pulling Vax, especially when it's not even an anti-vax documentary. It's a movie about a CDC whistleblower specifically. So and I've had Del Bigtree on the show, and my hats go off to him, who fights this vaccine issue straight on, which is something that, as you guys know, anytime you're looking at things from a different perspective, if it's alternative medicine or whatever, anything that goes against the grain, you get a lot of backlash. And so anytime I meet people like yourselves that are willing to get this information out there, because probably much like yourself, it could change lives. And out of all the topics I talk about, some of the topics that I think emotionally affect me the most is stuff like diet, nutrition, natural remedies, and medicine, because I know that people listening can hear this, and it can have a direct effect on their life, and it can change their life. And so hats off to you guys. I'm a huge fan of The Big Secret. As I mentioned, it's on Amazon Prime. I'm glad that I checked recently. I'm like, let me just make sure it's still on there before I say it's on there. So I was glad to see that it's still available there, so you can watch for free if you're an Amazon Prime member. But let's get right into your journey. How did this happen? Because I know, Susan, you kind of have a history of these topics, but Alex, not so much, right? You kind of...
Yeah, that's right. But I've been making documentaries for a while, but there are a lot of issues. And one of the best ways to learn about anything is to make a documentary about it. I was having significant health problems, and I was doing everything the doctors were telling me to do, and it wasn't working. I was getting sicker. And so I thought, well, let me do a documentary about this. And I didn't know which direction it would go. But once I started investigating it, I kept going, this just can't be true. Oh no, this can't be true. And after all the study and all the people we talked to, it was true. It was frightening. But we live in a Machiavellian medical monopoly that keeps people sick because it's profitable, and that's the frightening truth. And there's ways to handle your health out there that are much better than. I love lots of like the doctors in the emergency room are fantastic, but the chronic illness part of that is not very good. And so, it's like you want to take care of your problem with your health way back when it's a little bitty issue before it becomes a great big issue, and we don't do that. And I'm noticing, a lot of these doctors that try to go to better therapies get really suppressed. There's a cancer doctor in Houston that the federal government has spent almost $60 million trying to suppress.
And who's that?
That was Dr. Brzezinski.
Oh, he's been on my show. Yeah.
There's a wonderful movie about him on Amazon as well, and so I really appreciate Amazon for doing that. Netflix turned us down, and so I started this journey trying to find out who to talk to and what to do, and then I came across Susan, and that was like one of the best things that ever happened to the movie. And so she became the co-producer, and it went a lot further than I expected. It was a no-budget documentary when I started, and it's amazing all we did on such an incredibly low budget. And so I'm going to let Susan take over here and talk about what happened after I met her.
Yeah, Susan, you want to tell us about your journey real quick? I have had Dr. Brzezinski on probably 4 or 5 years ago. I'm a huge fan of his. Like Alex said, definitely check out his documentary too. It will tug at your heartstrings when you see the people whose lives he's changed, and the fact that this guy's been suppressed and all he's trying to do is help people. So Susan, what's your background in all this? Were you already in alternative medicine? How did you get involved with this perspective?
I've always interested in alternative medicine. Studied acupuncture, Ayurveda, homeopathy, traditional Chinese medicine, energy healing. Ever since I was 20 years old, I've been attracted to this. And I've always seen through things too. And I'm a little bit disappointed by what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a system that you give a pill to mask a symptom and create more. And as the movie says, we need to look underneath the hood and find out, why is this happening? I mean, I went into my physicians. He said, hey, take your statin. I had a cholesterol of 191, so I guess that's getting serious. And I said, well, aren't you concerned with the reason? I mean, cholesterol, it's only 20% of it comes from our diet, 80% we make. And if you cut down your intake of cholesterol, you're going to make more. So what's really going on? And I said, in my case, I've got a high lipoprotein A. And they looked at me, what's that? So, and I'm also disillusioned by our Congress. I mean, you can argue over the president if you've got this for a president or that for a president, but it's Congress that passes the laws. And so I don't know why we're quabbling over the president. Why not look at Congress that, you know, is not protecting us? I mean, like the EPA never had any valid laboratory. I mean, they did fake studies on any chemical. They did 2 months of studies and made the rest up. People like Donald Rumsfeld, for example, was paid to get aspartame passed by the FDA. And they knew at that point that aspartame was a carcinogen. It's also a neurotoxin. I mean, they were about to sue the company for faking the data in their studies, but then Donald Rumsfeld got it passed. And in a hospital I work in, all the beverages last spring had aspartame in it. What the F? And then you get EMF that, you know, it can resonate even at the level of our DNA. It interferes with cellular, I mean, it opens up the blood-brain barrier, interferes with cellular communication. What do you think is going to happen? And glyphosate, I've been going around complaining about that for years. Finally, some vindication with this recent lawsuit of $2 billion to a Livermore couple for glyphosate. And I hope there's many more coming at Monsanto, but they're going to appeal. And I don't know why the Congress is protecting them. I mean, I guess there is an answer. They're paid to. And that's not okay with me.
Yeah. Monsanto, now Bayer also, you know, it's one and the same. And they both have a history of, you know, and that's the thing. It's like people look at a lot of the stuff we talk about and it's like this giant conspiracy. It's a lot of times it's really simple. It's suits and ties deciding how do we make maximum profit. And if that means putting a chemical that's cheap, that might be harmful, that's all they care about. They care about quarterly gains. They care about how do we make maximum money. And they don't look at the long-term effects of this. And same thing with Big Pharma and the FDA being in bed together. Stuff gets FDA approved, and soon later people are getting harmful side effects from it, possibly death. And then all of a sudden there's commercials on TV, but with attorneys saying, hey, do you have a loved one who died by this drug? You know, we can get you money. It's like, well, isn't that the whole point of having an FDA, is so it gets approved to be safe, so we're not the guinea pigs, so this stuff doesn't get thrown on the market and we have loved ones who just tragically die because of some pill that a doctor told them to take. And what I love about your documentary too is that you went to the history of it. You know, like you talked about the Flexer report, you talk about the Rockefellers and their interest in all this. And that's really important because you always hear about, you know, it's almost like every piece of conspiracy or corruption in the world, the term Rockefellers come up. Oh, it's the Rockefellers controlling things. It's you know, it's the Carnegies, it's whatever. But this in this case specifically, they really had a huge influence on the trend from looking at root extracts, natural remedies. These things were considered medicines forever, and then we had this transition where it's like the only thing we considered medicine was these chemicals, these pills. And would you guys like to get into some of that history for the people listening?
Well, you know, one thing that, you know, when I went to say Rockefeller medicine, and, you know, you always want to be careful when you start accusing anyone or anything of doing something like that. So we spent a lot of time just studying that issue. The scriptwriter that worked on this narrator script, he went and researched it all. We went and researched it all. And the frightening truth is it was about money. And no one was concerned about suffering or cost or anything like that. They were just concerned with how can we take these petrochemicals that we're getting from our oil and turn them into something that we can sell somebody for a whole lot of money. And slowly they took over. And now it's this big pharma paradigm where, you know, everything has to have a pill to be cured. When actually, in reality, the reverse is true. I found that out on my, they had me on statins, they had me on all kinds of things, and I was getting sicker and sicker. And when I started realizing, that I could sort of take control of my health, things started turning around. And, there's absolutely no comparison between the living under the pills and taking all the pills. One of the people in the movie was the Catholic priest, and they had him on 27 different medications. 27 different medications. And he had liver failure because of it. The doctor said so. And then they put him in a nursing home, and they took him off all the pills, and he got better, and they put him in an apartment. And then the doctors put him back on the pills, and he died. And I've got another one. I had a lot of blowback on this from YouTube, but there was this NFL player that they'd put in hospice. And he was a friend of mine, and I said, why don't you just try what I'm saying with taking the minerals, getting off all the pills, and let's do these supplements and all this. And so he went into the hospital where he couldn't even walk. He had people physically take him to the bathroom, or he couldn't even get out of bed. And when he started doing some of these things that this alternative doctors were telling me, he got up and he started walking. He was an athlete, so after a while he got to where he'd walk outside the hospice, and he would go across to the gym and start working out at the gym, and he would jog around the streets around the hospice. But the thing was, the doctors told him he had 2 weeks to live. And what happened was they already filled out his death certificate. So he was already legally dead. And 9 months later, they had to reprocess all this paperwork because he was alive and healthy, because he started following some logical alternative treatments to his situation. And he had cancer, and he had, I put him in the hospital, was meningitis. And when they went and checked him again, they couldn't find the cancer. The HIV was undetectable. He may still have it, but it was undetectable. And, he was in really good health at his age. And I put a little story about this on YouTube, and all of a sudden, all these people out of the woodwork from somewhere start attacking it. And so the video gets pulled from YouTube, so I was real surprised. And so, and I think I see a little bit of that with the Big Secret with some of the people that do the reports on it. But I believe there's a lot.
We're not, a disclaimer here, we're not telling anybody to stop all your medications. We're not telling you to stop going to your doctor's office. You do this with your doctor's help. Maybe educate your doctor. Do your own research. But, we're not saying stop all the pills. We're just saying ask the right questions to your doctor and, work with him or your naturopath.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend, if you're on a lot of medications, to just stop it. I'd say do some research and find out what's best for you, and ask your doctor if I really need to be taking this pill.
And a great place to start doing your research is watching your documentary, The Big Secret, because I think that you guys hit on all these topics, and it really makes people rethink what they've been told. But like you said, Susan, about talk to your doctor. But isn't there some concern about the fact that the doctors, a lot of the recommendations you're going to get from the doctors are going to be research and studies and stuff pushed by pharmaceutical companies. So it's like, even if you try to go to your doctor and a lot of alternative perspectives, they kind of look at like it's pseudoscience, right? And it's not their fault, because a lot of it's what they were taught in the universities, and a lack of knowing what what other science outside of the science they've been shown says.
What you say has a lot of truth. It usually takes between 17 and 20 years between when the research comes out and when it's adopted in clinical practice. But as a physician, I have to say that. I don't have a choice. And true, your doctors might not know what you're talking about. They are not trained to look at why. I've had some real Luddites take your statin, take your antacid, and I try to, and they're just so arrogant about it and condescending and dismissive that this is the holy grail. And I think a lot of it's wrong. But as a physician, I have to tell you to work with your naturopath, your physician. I can't say anything else.
Yeah, do you guys want to get into the Flexor report and what that was all about, and how that changed them and the AMA, how that changed how we looked at medicine?
You want to do that, Susan, or you want me?
Why don't you do it? You're good at it.
Okay. Well, The Flexners actually, in a sense, they were trying to do a good thing. I don't think that it was necessarily the Flexners. What they wanted to do was improve medical schools in the United States. So the Flexner went to every school in the United States, and he had a list of criteria, and he evaluated the schools, and he made a report. And, even what some people would consider a really great school of medicine, like Baylor here in Texas, got a very bad report from Flexner because he was looking at how they did the clinical studies and all the important things. And so once this report came out, it showed a real need for change, but then the Rockefellers took advantage of that report. The Carnegies financed the report. The Rockefellers took advantage of that report, and then they went to Congress, and they influenced Congress to make the AMA the body that's in charge of medical schools in the United States. And so the AMA was at that time heavily influenced by the Rockefeller pharma industry. And, they get most of their money from pharma advertising or from, I think, writing protocols for what the doctors do. And so they were under heavy influence from the pharma industry even then. And so they basically eliminated all the alternative schools. And only thing remaining was maybe a few chiropractor schools, and then allopathy was the one that was the main one they were going with. And so, by the end of all of that, most of the schools that taught alternative forms of medicine, or what's considered alternative, were gone. And so it became this is what pill you have to give in this situation after that point.
Yeah, and that's the thing. People don't realize that before this time period, people didn't look down upon using vitamins, minerals, root extracts like that. They didn't look down upon that as pseudoscience or some type, crazy stuff. I mean, that's how we survived this long. That's how we've made it this far, was using food as our medicine, right? And medicine as our food, like that quote says. And it's so important. Your best defense against disease and stuff is your immune system. It's your own body. So if you can keep your body strong and healthy by giving it what it needs, and just trying to avoid the things that it doesn't, then yeah, your best defense is a healthy immune system. It'll have the ability to fight whatever it runs into. So there's so many issues in regards to you guys even talked about cholesterol, which I'm a big a fan of, like the ketogenic diet and the paleo diet, because it makes people, I've had Dr. Dominic D'Agostino on and Dr. Thomas Seyfried, and just people who really, and the thing people always ask, it's like, well, isn't your cholesterol levels going to go high, or isn't your, how can you consume all that fat? And it's like, it's like that quote, it's easier to trick somebody than convince them they've been tricked. And I think that people have been tricked for so long on nutrition, like margarine instead of butter, don't eat bacon, don't, stay away from fat, and everybody's ignoring the sugar and the carbs and the wheats and the glutens that are really causing the inflammation, that's really, feeding the cancer cells, causing all these issues, arthritis and so many diseases. And yet, you talk to somebody about like, hey, you know what? Cholesterol is okay. You can eat cholesterol. It's actually crucial. And the weird thing, too, is that if you look at children, and I have a 4-year-old boy and a 2-year-old girl, and when they're little, it's like you don't have any doctor who tells you fat's bad for you. They tell you fat's good for you, right? I mean, you need the DHAs, you need the healthy fats, but then you become an adult and they're like, stay away from fat, consume sugar, and it's like we had it right initially. We understand that, fats and cholesterols are so important for, brain development and cognitive function, and your body's a hybrid car. That's what I tell people. I'm like, it can run off glucose or it can run off fats, and fat's a better source of energy. If you can teach it, well, I shouldn't say teach it, reteach it, because for a long period of time, we would eat a lot of animal fat, fish fat, and try to stay full, and we would run off that. And we would from time to time go in ketosis, because we would go long. Food wasn't guaranteed. We would go long periods of time without eating, and then your body would have to burn the fat that it has stored, and you would go in ketosis. It was actually a natural state to be in at times. So it's really hard to convince people to kind of go against everything they've been taught. When I was in school, we had the food pyramid that told you the majority of your calories should be, breads and wheats and pastas and all this stuff. And people working out more than ever, and yet people are still getting obese. They're still having diabetes. They're still having all these issues. And it's not just the amount of calories you're intaking, but it's what you're intaking. And
do you know where this started? It started with the sugar industry figured, how can we sell more sugar? Well, it makes fat a demon. And then in our movie, we mentioned that Harvard got some bribes to make fat the culprit and make sugar the panacea. And that's how we got started. And at one point, the U.S. threatened to pull out all of its funding to WHO, the World Health Organization, because they wanted to lower the recommended amount of sugar from 25 grams a day to 10. So, I mean, the backdrop of this, it's kind of dark and smelly.
Yeah, and it's a sugar, lots of people need to start thinking of sugar as a poison, and especially high fructose corn syrup. If you want to get sick, if you want to be very unhealthy, if you want to have all these different diseases, eat a lot of high fructose corn syrup. I mean,
it's got lead in it. It's got lead in it. It's genetically modified. And as it says in the movie, there was one county in Texas that didn't use it in their Dr. Pepper. And that county had a lot lower level of diabetes than the surrounding counties that just poured the high fructose corn syrup in. I mean, it's really batty.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Gary Taubes and his work, and exposing the sugar industry and the horrible science that was behind demonizing fat and cholesterol, and that's the other thing too about science. It just, people like to think it's people with no agendas, and they just focus on the facts, and here's the study, but it's like, people like Gary Taubes. And James Corbett, who had who was in your film, and he's a recent guest of mine, a great researcher who had a great little documentary video called the Crisis of Science, and it just shows, it documents all these studies that show that the majority of studies can't be recreated. The people who put out fake studies just to show how easily you can get something peer reviewed. For example, he used the scientist who put out a fake study saying that you can lose weight eating chocolate, and it got all these headlines and got all his attention because, oh my God, there's a study that and then he came out and said, hey, he's like, I picked and choose what part of the study I was going to use, and how explain how he manipulated it, and how you can kind of get the outcome you want. And so there, that's a huge issue with science, but I think we can learn a lot. I've had C.J. Hunt, who did another great documentary called The Perfect Human Diet, and he, in that documentary, they talk to anthropologists, they talk to historians, they talk to people, and I think what you learn is that we can learn from our ancestors. Like, what did we used to eat? How did we survive all this time? And when you look at all these processed foods, it's just, that's the culprit. When you look at all the diets, there's a couple things that they all have in common. If it's the keto diet, if it's the Atkins diet, paleo diet, like they all say get rid of sugars and processed foods. And so I think that's super crucial. Now, in your lives, like, what do you guys, how do you eat? Is there any diet that you subscribe to? Is there any drastic change in your diet that you saw some serious benefits from?
Well, see, I'm mainly doing paleo now, and sometimes I swing into hard keto. And like you're saying, over 100 years ago, a human being was lucky to maybe eat 2 pounds of sugar a year. And now we're up to like 40, 50 pounds of sugar a year.
It's more like 160?
More like 160?
I might be wrong.
And, I'll take your word for it because but they we're eating more sugar than we were designed to. Sugar was supposed to be a luxury, not a commodity, and we didn't. But I'll stick with like 2 or 3 eggs in the morning, and then I'll eat bacon that doesn't have any preservatives in it, and then some sort of fruit, healthy fruit, and and I don't hardly ever eat any bread or any kind of grain product, and I avoid the really dangerous oils. I'll stick to healthy oils, healthy fat, and that seems to work best for me. And I notice it, like if sugars is addictive. So everybody wants to eat a lot of sugar because it's a very addictive product. And so I'll know if I eat like a praline or something that has a lot of sugar, and then I have all these aches and pains the next day. It's very informative. Your body will tell you what's going on.
Yeah, that's huge with me. I do the ketogenic diet, but I love meat, so a huge part of it's fatty meat. But it's once I end up eating a little bit of sugar, or well, not even sugar. Like I'll if I have because usually I don't consume any sugar, but my sugar comes from wine. I'm Portuguese, so it's hard to cut out the wine in my diet. So I'll have a glass of wine with dinner, or half a glass of wine, or whatever. But from time to time, you end up having a bottle of wine, and then what ends up happening is the next morning I feel it in my joints. I'll get the inflammation is back, and I'll get some joint pain. And but if I stay away from it, it's amazing how many people wake up every day with joint pain that could feel better just by removing these inflammation pains. Dr. Chris Kresher on the Joe Rogan podcast once, he mentioned how the modern medicine is like having foot pain because you have a rock in your shoe, and the doctor giving you a painkiller instead of telling you to get the rock out of your shoe. And that's basically it. They take care of the symptom. They don't get to the root cause of it, what's causing the issue. And that's why I think all these alternative doctors are getting a lot of attention, because they'll spend, somebody like Chris Kresher will spend time trying to figure out, like, okay, what's your diet? How active are you? And get to the root cause of these issues, which is really what you want to do. I mean, a lot of these pharmaceutical companies, they give you, they create a pill that has symptoms that they can create another pill for. So it's just like, it's a great way of, it's a great business motto. It's like, hey, here's a pill, and then this is going to have some side effects, some symptoms, and then we'll create a pill for those symptoms. And it's like, it's great, but you're making everybody sick. I think they were saying, I don't know if it was in your documentary, or I think it was, where somebody was saying how this generation is going to be the first generation that doesn't outlive their parents.
We had it, yes.
Yeah. Well, you guys had about just everything in your documentary, so I'm sure I'm probably cool. A lot of stuff I'm talking about is quoted from your documentary. And you had Dr. Kelly Brogan in your documentary, which I love. She's awesome too. I think it's so important for people to rethink depression and anxiety, and look at the fact that the history of DSM, a lot of it's not scientific at all, and it's just made up symptoms. They use terms like chemical imbalance when it's like, well, are you testing for the chemical, or are you just using this term to make it sound scientific so you can give me a pill?
You can't test for it.
Exactly.
You can't test for the neurotransmitters. You can get a blood value, but it doesn't tell you what's going on in the brain.
Yeah, exactly. So they tell you there's a chemical imbalance, but there's no way of knowing which chemical's imbalance, how imbalanced it is. So you become a guinea pig. Try this pill. If that doesn't work, try that pill. Try this pill. And there's tons of studies, and I think Kelly Brogan talked about it in your documentary, that there's studies that show exercise and things like meditation and change of diet can do a better job with helping anxiety and depression than antidepressants.
As a psychiatrist, I agree.
Yeah. So it's amazing, because I tell people that stuff all the time, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with, like, the rat park experiment. You familiar with that? Where they had the rats, they put either cocaine or heroin in the water. It kept coming back until it died, and then these Canadian scientists are like, well, one thing we didn't take in consideration is that the cage has become a part of the experiment. So let's create this thing called Rat Park, where they can run around, they can mate, they can play, and see if they continue to come back like they did in the first experiment, and drink water until they died. And they didn't. They came, they drank the water, they left, and they had a great time, and never came back. And what they realized from that was that addiction might not be just because of symptoms addictive, but it's you're self-medicating. There's some internal issues, and if you, I think we're constantly searching for happiness or pleasure. We're pleasure monkeys. It's we listen to music that makes us happy. We watch documentaries that bring us some pleasure. We hang out with certain people that make us happy, and I have a glass of wine because it makes me happy. But so I think when you're that mouse in that cage and you don't have happiness, that cocaine or that heroin might bring you some type of happiness, some joy, so you keep going back to it. But if you have other alternatives, then you don't need that thing, and that's why and I'd love to get your opinion on this, Susan, but, my opinion is that most people, it's not about the addictive properties of the actual thing that they're taking. It's about some internal issue that they're self-medicating with. Because my opinion is always, well, if cocaine has these addictive properties that you can quantify, then everybody who sniffs cocaine should get addicted to it. Then why are some people addicted to it, and some people do it once at a party and never touch it again? So what's your opinions on that, Susan?
Well, a lot of the fast food, like Robert Lustig discusses in his book, Corporate Hacking or something like that, is that they get you addicted via the dopamine, and that's the pleasure, as opposed to serotonin is the happiness. You can hear him on my radio show, which is called Occupy Health, and I've interviewed a lot of the same people that you have. So, you check out Occupied Health and Voice America, and I interviewed Dr. Lustig. But, they get us addicted with the dopamine, so we just want the pleasure, whereas it's just like a rat in a spinning cage. You're just going nowhere. Now, is there emptiness in the life that brings people there? I deal with drug users, at least 10 or 20 of them every day, and I see them when they're high, and everything, they love the drugs more than themselves and their lives, and they'll lose where they live, they'll lose a job, they'll be cut off by everyone they know. They can fall into the level of being a toss-up where you give certain services in exchange for drugs. It's vicious, but the whole advertisement is on the dopamine process of pleasure. And like in gluten, gluten's got at least 8 components to it. It's not just you go get the gliadin antibody as the doctor measures. It's got 8 components. You need to measure all of them. But one of them is gluteomorphine, which acts like opiates and gives people that pleasure. So I wouldn't be surprised if the companies didn't know what they were doing.
So you actually think it's accidental?
No, I said I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. I think they know what they're doing, okay. And they're doing this intentionally. Maybe it was accidentally stumbled across, but people are addicted to a lot of things. Game Boys, TV, chocolate. It's just something we do.
Yeah, but I also think a lot of that has to do with that stuff brings you some type of joy, some type of pleasure, some type of.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah.
But the first high, like in drugs, you never get that same high, but they keep going back hoping for it. The first bite of cake or anything is the best. If you eat a large piece of it, the marginal enjoyment goes down. So, interview Robert Lustig on the dopamine theory, how that get society hooked on these things because they're searching the pleasure rather than the happiness.
Huh. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's interesting. I'm a huge fan of his work too with sugar and all that. So, yeah, he's an interesting guy, and yeah, that's an interesting point of view. That's the thing. Like a lot of these topics are so complex, and doctors or TV or whatever would just make it very cut and dry, but that's why I love having these podcasts, because I get to hear so many different perspectives and opinions, and I think that they should all be entertained. You shouldn't poo-poo anything and be like, oh, that's crazy, or that's pseudoscience, or that doesn't make sense. It's like, you know what, I've been wrong so many times before. My way of trying not to be wrong so often is entertaining all the ideas and perspectives, and see where it leads me. And so in your personal life, Susan, is there any foods or anything that you cut out or you stick to or anything like that?
I aspire to the paleo diet, but when I go to work and there's all these sweets around, I succumb. But what I want to do is no sweets or sugars and just eat healthily.
Yeah. Well, we use from time to time I'll have my wife make me some keto dessert, and you can use monk fruit, which has no effect on your blood sugar, your insulin levels, and can make something taste sweet. And the nice thing about fat is fat has a lot of flavor. When they had this craze with low fat yogurt, low-fat milk, all this stuff. They took out all the flavor, so then they end up inputting more sugar. So, which, people are looking at labels, and I was notorious for it. I mean, I remember when I was in my teens and I was really into weightlifting, I was always trying to get the leanest cut of meat, and I wanted low-fat everything. And one thing that I never, ever paid any attention to, which was how much sugar was in all the products I was taking. I'm like, I'm not looking what type of sweetener they're using or if there's sugar. I'm just looking at fat, and I'm looking at protein. I was trying to get low fat, high protein, and how many people probably have serious issues because of that, because of and that's,
another thing you can do, because bread kind of is cool, but you can get bread out of almond flour and coconut flour, and there's this bakery called Ducks and Dragons where you can go on and they make it almond flour, coconut flour with a little bit of tapioca. You could go on and they'll send it to you. But it's really tasty because now I can have toast slathered with butter and it doesn't affect the glycemic index. I can have pizza with tomato sauce and cheese, something I haven't had for years. And it's very low glycemic index.
Yeah, we do.
Another thing that concerns me is the censorship I see going on. I mean, I announced a speaker, Thomas Cowan, coming to speak in a nonprofit I'm involved in. I got 40 pages of hate mail.
Wow.
I mean, anti-vaxxers are being attacked. I mean, pretty nastily. Can't even have a dialogue about it. I mean, Etsy, Pinterest, Amazon, Facebook. I mean, I think other places are starting to just cutting it down because this concept of the herd immunity, oh my God, these people are going to ruin all of us. I'm not clear about that. Anyway, because Thomas Cowan and J.B. Hanley have some very interesting point of views. Check my show, interview them. But, there's two sides of this, and they're shutting down one side. That scares me.
Your show is it also available on iTunes or any of the places that get podcasts?
Yeah. Yes.
It is.
It's Netflix. We sent it to Netflix and they turned it down.
Well.
Yeah, that's kind of, and that's the thing that drives me nuts, because when Netflix first started getting popular, they used to have a lot. I mean, I used to watch tons of documentaries on there and a lot of controversial documentaries. And now that's why when I first called you guys, I was talking about how you guys are on Amazon, and I wasn't surprised that Netflix turned you down, because even though they I'm really disappointed with Amazon and pulling Vaxxed recently, because like you guys are talking about, like the dialogue needs to be out there, and people need to get the information and let people make their own decision. Get the information, because the thing is, I have a lot of parents or friends of mine or other parents online who contact me, and they know I've had Del Bigtree on, and I've had I just talked about vaccines with Dr. Kendra Becker too, who was on not too long ago, and people know, they come to me with information, then they feel guilty about, like, well, I feel bad because I vaccinated my child, this and that, and I'm like, listen, you can only make your decision based on the information you have. What bothers me is you only have one side of the argument. You don't even have the right to see the other argument, so you can make a lot. And that's what really bothers me. That's the nice thing about having these podcasts, and I'm sure similar to your show, Susan, like, you can talk about whatever you want, and you can help push this so then people can see both sides of the argument. Then you decide, and then the parent can decide which way, but at least give them the information. And that's what bothers me the most, is the fact that people aren't even getting that information. You're going to a pediatrician who's telling you the science is settled and that everything's all, it's been proven to be safe, and they don't know anything about, Dr. William Thompson. They don't know anything about, thimerosal. They don't know anything about anything else. And it's like, wait, how can you say this? What about the vaccine courts that are giving out money?
Over $4 billion, and anybody that came with an argument that it caused autism automatically lost, because the government did not recognize autism as an outcome. You had to go say, I've got neurological damage. Many of them, I think, were limited to $250,000, and there's one expert witness that they settled for a large amount under the condition he testify no more in any court or participate no more. I mean, we paid over $4 billion. They're indemnified. I mean, and England's also identified. I mean, what's wrong with this picture? I mean, the other side is so radical. I mean, in England and the U.S., they used to have measles parties, German measles party. Hey, kid has a German measles, come on over. I mean, Thomas Cowan in his book makes the argument that if you have exposure to German measles, for example, your immunity in a lot of other conditions is much improved. I mean, there was apparently a mumps outbreak at Harvard, and I'm told, I could be wrong, that they were all vaccinated. There's something not right with this picture. And as you mentioned, the thermosol and all the ingredients, who knows, nanoparticles, who knows? Some of this stuff is scary to talk about because, people have, lost their lives over talking about it too much. So,
yeah.
Where's the rationality?
Yeah, and that's another thing. It's when I had a doctor who was supposed to be on. Oh my God, I forget his name. Dr. Mitchell, I forget one of the alternative doctors that passed away mysteriously, and he was supposed to be on. We had it scheduled, and then I get an email like the weekend before he was supposed to be on saying that he unfortunately passed away, and this and that. And this was around the same time a lot of doctors were having mysterious deaths. And so of course I'm talking to people, and I'm like, this seems kind of too convenient, too suspicious, and people are looking at me like, oh, no, that's crazy, and I look at them and I'm like, how much money's involved in pushing modern medicine and all the. I mean, if somebody came out and we talked about Dr. Brzezinski, but if somebody had a clear cut, this is the cure to cancer, it's undebatable, it works 100% of the time. I'm like, do you know how many people would be out of jobs? I'm like, the whole wings of hospitals that just focus on chemo and radiation and cancer treatment would be out of jobs. All the people who make the machines, everybody who makes the medication, everybody would be out of a job. So why would they, why would they not go over and beyond to make sure that this, they can keep milking this cash cow of the way things are, And
now, I've interviewed people that corporate America actually tried to murder, and I've interviewed the witnesses. One case, if you want to look at GMOs, two researchers that just looked at GMOs and not the glyphosate are Dr. Seralini and Dr. Pustai, went to both of their houses. Pustai, Monsanto called up Clinton, called up Tony Blair, said, shut the guy up. And what they did to him was tragic. Seralini, there were several folders on him that Monsanto had about trying to discredit him anyway. They hire all sorts of people to write. Monsanto writes the articles and gets all sorts of researchers to sign their name to it. In Argentina, there was a GMO researcher that actually got beat. They were trying to beat him up. I don't think they'd stop at anything. And is something wrong with this picture? How much money's enough?
Yeah, I just looked up the doctor. It was Dr. Mitchell Gaynor was the one who had the mysterious death, who was supposed to be on my show, and he's just one of the many that was like that. And yeah, Dr. Seralini's study is very fascinating. James Corbett, who's done tons of great work, also has a great video on the Seralini study. And if people aren't familiar with it, please look it up, because this was a guy who proved harmful effects of with mice with pesticides and GMOs, and this thing got pulled and really unjustifiedly pulled, and eventually I think he ended up getting it republished, right? Was that?
Yeah, Pustai and Seralini got it republished. I'm going to interview Seralini this summer. So yeah, it's really dark. And I grew up idealistically. I just kind of thought we were for good and democracy and making the world a better place. What the dickens happened? It's kind of embarrassing.
When I started doing this movie, I just, was thinking, that I used to believe what everybody told me, when they said, oh, this Coca-Cola is great for you and all this, and you eat this, particular food product, this is the best thing ever. And I started doing the movie. I said, I have been so misled.
Who the heck told you Coca-Cola was good for you? You delete them from your phone right now because they're lying to you.
They used to have commercials. You would have an athlete holding a Coke and
a cigarette.
I remember, when I moved over to high fructose corn syrup, and I grew up, I drank Coca-Cola and Dr. Pepper more than I drank water. Okay, in my teenage years, but it was sugar and it was not as bad. But when they switched over to high fructose corn syrup, I noticed a major change in the way I felt and what was going on. And, but you grew up and you have this faith in people that are on television and that tell you what to do and what's best for you, and that this food product is what you need to eat. And then when you get to the point and realize they've all betrayed you, it's a very scary thing.
Yeah, and the other And the other thing too is the quality of food. So it's not even, we have an issue with not just what we're eating, but the quality of what we're eating. So it's like people will eat chicken, and that's why I try to avoid chicken, because most chicken is poor quality chicken. It tastes like rubber, and I'm like, well, at least if I get something, some livestock, a cow or whatever, at least it's something that I know isn't as restricted in its movement. And a lot of chickens, they're just, they never move in their life. They just sit there, they eat, and then they die. And then even with fruit, I think in your documentary you guys also talk about the lack of nutrition in fruit now. They're constantly trying to make fruit bigger and sweeter. That's the other thing, like the debate with the paleo diet. A lot of people talk about how, I can eat fruit because the paleo diet says it's okay. I'm like, you have to understand, our ancestors did eat fruit, I'm sure, but it was seasonable, it was smaller, it was less sweet, so it's like, it's now, fruit's a dessert. I mean, it has as much, you might as well just eat cheesecake, or it's just, if you're eating bananas and peaches and oranges, I mean, a lot of the stuff, the nutritional value, versus how much sugar you're getting, I don't know if it's worth it, right?
Well, chicken and the beef, they feed it hormones, antibiotics, they're eating insecticides, and that's very bad for you. I mean, like, even if you've got organic bread, they might spray it with glyphosate. They do that right before they harvest it to dry it. So what they're doing to our food is atrocious. There's food that we eat here that they'll not allow in other countries.
Yeah. That's...
What do the Japanese do with moldy coffee full of ochre toxins? They send it to us because we don't care. So people are eating all these drinking carcinogenic coffee. I mean, we've got no. I mean, some countries won't even take our stuff or our meat or cheeses.
You see, it's a question of priority. They'll spend $60 million trying to put Brzezinski out of business, but they don't pay attention to the food that people are eating, and they don't even acknowledge that the quality of food is important.
Or $60 million on a high school football stadium?
Well, that's something around $100 million.
Oh, it was $100 million in Dallas. I mean, what are our priorities?
Well, that was it. Actually, McKinney. It was a big football stadium. But no one thinks, if the kids were eating healthy food, maybe they'd be able to learn better. Maybe they'd be better athletes. You look at these kids and the food that they're eating and the food that they get to eat and the water that they're drinking. It's just frightening.
Another thing is a guy named Hugh Taylor at Yale and a guy, Suleiman in Turkey, they both did independent studies of putting a cell phone near the pregnant abdomen of a rodent. And the offspring had brain changes, especially in the hippocampus, which is seriously affected in Alzheimer's, and a lot of ADHD type symptoms. I think, the diet will, food colorings, a lot of diet will engender that. We wonder why we've got so much ADHD. And autism, I published an article on that. It's to me, is the final common pathway of everything that goes wrong. And look how it's increasing. Some people say it'll be 1 out of 2 kids in the future.
Yeah. Exposure is not really healthy if it's 24/7 and it's microwave, even if it's low level.
And this 5G,
I know. There's been
check out my podcast of 5G planet depopulation.
Yeah, and it's called Occupy Health, right? Your show.
Yeah.
I'll definitely.
But I think you're great as a host. I don't want you to think that you're tops. I mean, I'll say you're much better than me. So I just
Thank you. I thought I'm like the one good thing I can do is that's why I call this the Ripple Effect podcast. Much like yourself, both of you. I mean, you felt like, hey, you know what? Let me attempt to make the world a little better than I received it, and regardless how small of an impact it is, you never know how it ripples out and how big of a difference it can can make. And that's why I constantly tell people, I'm like, this show is a perfect example that you can cause a ripple, and you never know what it's going to grow to be. And I'm just a person who is passionate. I mean, I have a full-time job. I was just passionate about these topics and felt like I could do my part in trying to spread these conversations. And then now I've had people like Jesse Ventura on. I've had Roger Stone on. I've had Dr. Brzezinski on. I've had tons of people that I've had great discussions with and been able to just share ideas and challenge ideas. And it's like, who am I? So it's like I always tell people, the listeners, I'm like, we can all make a difference. And just like you guys, I mean, you get a topic that you're passionate about, and people will appreciate that, and people will appreciate the fact that you're passionate about something and you're trying to make the world a better place. And because the alternative is much scarier. I mean, the alternative is what? Do nothing. Some people, ignorance is bliss. They'd rather, because it is scary. I mean, when people watch your documentary for the first time and this is all new information to them, then it can make you a little paranoid. You're like, well, what is anything I know true? Like, is everything a lie? And it can make you, and it's almost easier for some people to just decide that, what, I'm going to ignore this. I'm just going to go on with my life. But I think that people like all of us, that's actually a harder road for us. I think it's hard for us to know this information, to know that people are being lied to, and not attempt to do something.
It's like falling in love. I mean, your heart chooses the person, the body goes along for the ride. I had a conversation with my college roommate, Stephanie Seneff, who's in the movie, and both of us decided we cannot not do this. I mean, we are aware that it could shorten our life expectancy, but we cannot not do this. How can we? Just can't. It's a spiritual thing. We cannot not do it.
Yeah,
no choice.
Magnitude of all the people that are being hurt, and it's probably in the millions now, and some people listen. What surprised me is some people listen, and like you, and they get it. But I'll say to someone, you're eating that bread, it has glyphosate in it, it's very, very, and they just sort of shrug their shoulders and go on. But then there's a lot of people that actually listen and they change their behavior and they benefit from it.
Well, you know what it is? People don't worry about their decisions until they're finally at the point where they're chronically ill. And it drives me crazy. I tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, every decision you make every day will get you either closer to healthy or sick. So it's like, if you keep eating this, and like you said, Alex, say they eat the bread, they don't feel any different. They don't, they didn't wake up the next day.
They feel better.
Yeah, sometimes they feel better. They wake up the next day, they think that, they're like, I'm not going to wake up the next day and have cancer, so what do I care? And then one day, they are going to wake up sick, and then they're going to be like, what happened? I thought I was healthy. And I bet you, on the majority of people, if you did some investigating into their lifestyles, how they're eating, what they're eating, you'd find out like, oh, okay, it was all these decisions, these poor decisions that led you to here. And it wasn't just an overnight thing. It was you not caring about eating this, even though you knew it was genetically modified and had pesticides on it, or you consuming too many antibiotics through your food and all this stuff. And then it ends up causing these issues. I mean, Dr. Thomas Seyfried, who wrote the book Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, I believe is the title. And, he great research on how, the ketogenic diet and a dietary therapy like that can help with cancer patients. It can help manage and cure disease. And he has 150 peer-reviewed studies, and nobody's interested in it because who wants to invest in something that is just basically tells you to eat different and then you feel better? It's like, well, who benefits from that? No farm, you can't patent anything, so it's like, who's gonna? So this stuff's not out there. So there's a lot of people out there who aren't getting this information. They don't realize how these life changes, how these dietary changes could affect the way they think cognitively, the way they feel, their energy. I mean, if anybody listening has kids or have loved ones and you want to live a little longer, or you want to have a little bit more energy for them, I mean, that's what motivates me. It's not just, I mean, I play basketball, I go to the gym, I try to stay active because I think, not even just the physical part of it, I like the mental part of it. I like the fact that I feel like mentally I feel better when I'm exercising and moving, because that's kind of our natural state. The way we live today, where we can sit in front of a cubicle or in a cubicle in front of a computer all day. You can take an Uber home. You can order takeout. You can spend all day seated. You never have to get up to do anything. Like, that's such a small percentage of human history. The majority of the time we had to go kill something. If something broke, we had to fix it with our bare hands. So it's like we haven't adapted to this lifestyle that we have, and it's and then you add the poor quality of food and things like Doritos and stuff like that it's like it's just snacks, there's no food in it. It's like, what are you intaking? And then you're full for a second, and then you're hungry again because your insulin levels and all this stuff. So, but I think people are going in the right direction. Companies like Primal Kitchen are becoming much more popular, which I love their products. Julian Bakery, speaking of another one that makes like tons of almond and coconut flour breads and wraps and crackers. Another one, No Foods, is another one. Like, there's tons of great alternatives, because it's kind of good that people are now becoming a little bit more conscious of it, and it's things like the ketogenic diet or the paleo diet are becoming more popular, because then people who maybe their heart's not in the right place, but they might be like, oh, there's some profit in this, so let's get involved, let's invest. So even if their heart's not in the right place, and organic, you're seeing much increase in organic. But I know there's a lot of argument on like, well, like free range, and like how strict are they with the guidelines of what's free range and what's not and stuff like that. So I think we still have to be careful, when we're buying from big corporations who are very good at finding loopholes in things, and also the trickery with labeling, because labeling is really crucial. It says natural, and then you find out there's artificial flavors in it.
Never trust natural. Natural or fragrance. Fragrance can have like up to 100 or more petroleum products and God knows what, and never trust natural. It's a catch-all. And then there's a lot of things they put in their product that they won't list because they say it's a company secret, and that just allows them to put all sorts of nasty things in there. I don't trust many of these companies.
Yeah, I think that's one of yeah.
A lot of it, is driven by people that have a lot of money. For instance, the water with the hexafluorosilicic acid. And one thing that we discovered that we put in the movie was that, they have fluoridation in poor areas, but rich areas do not fluoridate, many parts of the U.S. And they say, well, fluoride is something the kids have to have. Well, why don't the rich kids have to have fluoride?
Yeah, that's
and fluoride's great on a tooth, but it just causes harm elsewhere.
Yeah, I've heard you say that, and I think that's a really important statement, because there's always the anti and then the pro fluoride argument. And one thing I've never really thought of was like, okay, even if there's studies that prove that it can actually help with dental health, it doesn't mean if you consume it, it can't be harmful for other stuff. So it's like, even like, just because you can find a study that says that there could be some improvements with dental health with fluoride, that could be true, but it could also be true that fluoride's bad for you and harmful. So it doesn't necessarily mean that one's true, the other one's untrue. So even in the dental industry, there's a great documentary called Root Cause, and it goes into like people who are getting all types of fillers and stuff like that, and the harmful effects of that. That could be causing. I don't see the thing with me. I don't trust most doctors, and I don't trust most industries that are.
Me neither.
And because of it, I'm like, well, couldn't even the dental industry be a little bit of bullshit? Couldn't it be a little? The
dental industry has a lot of that. Dr. Kennedy, whom I interviewed, did some films of when you brush your teeth or you chew gum, the fumes of the mercury just go right up into your brain. And fluoride and mercury are toxins, neurotoxins. You need almost a hazmat suit to dispose of them. And this is good for our bodies. The ADA, American Dental Association, according to Eric Semensky, who's in our film, I don't know, I wouldn't trust them.
Yeah, that's a huge issue, because even with most things, it's just, you have to. I have a child, and they're trying to get my child to have fluoride, wash in their mouth, and I'm like, aren't they losing their teeth anyways? They're 2 and 4. Like, what am I concerned? Oh, maybe you should go, go to a dentist, or if you, I'm like, they're losing their teeth. It's amazing when something becomes for profit. I think that's a huge issue, and this goes into the whole argument with, we have a healthcare problem because the cost of everything's super high, and then we have an issue with the fact that should the healthcare be universal? Should we have universal healthcare? Is it something that we should all deserve to have access to, or not? And I know that, being from Portugal, I know that, and you look at Canada and a lot of Western European countries, it's not perfect. A lot of the universal healthcare, but so isn't ours. Our system's not perfect either. And the crazy thing about America is that a huge part of people's debt in a lot of cases is healthcare costs. I mean, it's, people dread having a huge, some serious medical issue because they know that that's going to put them in some serious debt. And, and I think I
spent 14 hours in the emergency room. The bill was $90,000. I had 2-hour surgery. The bill was $120,000. I didn't pay any of it, but it seems kind of high to me.
Well, the thing is, the profiteering in the medical industry is just excruciatingly high in the United States, and they don't do the preventative care. And I think before you could have national health care, you'd probably have to get the rates in line, and you'd have to start dealing with people when the disease was early before they get into the expensive.
Well, they would also end up rationing. I worked in the NHS in England, and I had a patient. We ask for a neuroconsult here. We get it the same day or maybe tomorrow if we do late in the afternoon. There, I was waiting over 2 months for a neurologist in the same hospital. We weren't even on the radar. I had another patient who had a brain bleed, and he was waiting over a year for surgery. They do have some preventive, but in England, it's the same allopathic model. I mean, they might be a lot better at a lot of things. I don't know. I mean, they've got functional medicine taking root there as well. So
yeah, you're starting to see functional medicine become more popular in the U.S. too, which is good. But I mean, so from all the research you guys have done, from your perspective, is there a solution? How do we fix the mess that we're in?
Okay, a couple of solutions, I think, that, let's start with Congress. One vote, one law. You don't add 2,000 pieces of pork in there and have Pelosi get up there and says, I don't know what it says. We'll read it when we pass it. Stop this doggone lobbyist stuff buying our Congress. I mean, Trump is supposed to clean the swamp. The swamp doesn't want to be cleaned. I mean, do those two things and we'll have a start, because what we're doing is not sustainable. You can't keep printing money. It's not sustainable. Something very bad's going to happen, and we're not going to like it.
Yeah, all empires fall, and
get rid of the lobbyists that are buying our congressmen. I mean, Congress doesn't want to stop that. I mean, I talked to somebody in a country, I better not say that, but, Hillary Clinton's pushing GMOs with all the ministers throughout the world, but I won't go there.
Look at Bill Gates. I mean, he goes to different...
I'm scared of him.
Yeah, and he goes to different countries, right, to feed children. And what does he bring? Grains. Like, you're basically causing inflammation and disease. And
he donates so much to the WHO. It's a large amounts, and he's behind these vaccines, and I don't think he's open to questioning. However, in our next movie, I've interviewed a friend of his who has a totally different view on EMF. Former head of Microsoft Canada, Frank Clay.
Wow. Yeah. That's
Bill Gates' house, they were friends.
Well, you look at Trump. I mean, Trump was, he questioned vaccines slightly, and now he's kind of backtracked a little bit. He doesn't seem to be, wanting to dibble-dabble in that topic anymore.
I know, that's just sad. And also what he's doing, the environment and the Paris environmental thing and the EPA. I mean, it's tragic. I mean, I guess that, he's unpopular in so many areas that the environment and the things that are best for society were the first that he abandoned. I don't know. He's going to clean the swamp. I don't know.
He forgot the HHS, didn't he?
Well, I'm not happy with what he's doing.
Yeah, I think there's a huge issue with once they become president, who's really pulling the strings, who's influencing them, because you look at Trump, I mean, so many things that he talked about prior to becoming president, he didn't he's backtracking on all of it. He's back.
Even Obama goes into Flint, Michigan, and he had a chance to be a real hero.
Yep.
He picks up a glass of the water and just puts his tongue in it and says, nothing wrong here. He did that twice. Now, Oakland, I understand, have lead levels as high as Flint, Michigan, as about 13% of the cities in New Jersey. I mean, I think when they get there, certain ideals, I mean, I think Obama had a lot of great ideas, too, that he had to back off on.
Yeah.
And he was going to put GMO labeling on the food, and somehow that didn't happen.
Well, somebody I know talked to Obama's cook, and they knew all about high fructose corn syrup, but Obama wasn't going to touch it because of the corn farmers. They knew.
Yeah.
And I understand Parliament in UK, and I don't know, there's a rumor about Monsanto Kitchen that don't have GMOs. I don't know.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, like, what are they eating? What are they? I mean,
well, I've spoken to somebody in those circles, and they're not eating GMO.
You see, the thing is, when you go in a rich area, they're not having the fluoride in the water, and so I imagine that would translate to all the rest of the food. They'd be smart enough to know that you're going to live a lot longer if you avoid all these slow toxins and poisons.
Yeah,
I don't know if they're smart enough. I don't know. I don't think. I just don't know. But just don't know. It's scary.
Yeah, I mean, even something like lead. I've heard people talk about, and I've read articles about how lead paint, when they removed all the lead paint from departments in New York City, all the violence went down. So you think about what are they doing by putting fluoride, mercury, all this stuff. Especially with the poor population, it's like you're keeping them, keeping them dumb. You're keeping them from having any opportunity to grow. You're keeping them in poverty. So, and then you can continue medicating them, with a lot of times taxpayers are paying for it because it's if they have, state, or federal insurance, if you're in poverty, the taxpayer pays for your pills and your medication, so you're keeping them sick. The taxpayers are paying for it. You're keeping them violent, so you can fill up the prisons. So it's just like this vicious cycle where just like keeping things like this and keeping people sick and dumb and violent benefits. It doesn't benefit the society, I don't think, but it benefits the few on top.
I'd like to think it's not that sinister, although it may well be. I'd like to think it's a natural extension of greed, but I've certainly heard all the theories that it might be more than that. But, I mean, that's too much for us to grapple with, so let's just grapple with it's a natural extension of greed, and that might be something we can do something about.
Well, when you see what happened to Brzezinski, you saw an effort by many government agencies.
Seeing it here in San Francisco to various doctors, you don't have to go far to see it.
Yeah.
So there's a plan there somewhere.
Yeah. It seems like it. It definitely seems like it. But like Susan said, that plan could be motivated just by a simple explanation of greed. I mean, you look at the Rockefellers. They wanted, when you talk to them, you talk about the history of medicine, and like you guys mentioned, and you talk about in your documentary, it was about being able to patent things using chemicals that they could profit from. It wasn't necessarily maybe about getting people sick or making them sick. It was about how do we profit, and if the outcome means people are also sick, then that's okay. That's it just the ends justifies the means. So it's
could be that.
Yeah. Rockefeller's father made a fortune selling cancer cures that didn't work. But he'd go away from home for weeks at a time and come back with a lot of money after he'd been charging people a lot of money for cancer cures. And, when you have cancer, you're going to pay as much as you can to get cured, even though it didn't work. And so that's an extension maybe of what's happening today.
Yeah, and I believe he had a different name, too, because he was he screwed so many people over. He was using different names and stuff like that. I think, the cancer cure Rockefeller. I don't even think he went by Rockefeller. He had like a couple different names just because he was screwing over so many people. But yeah, this is all super interesting stuff. I can't thank you guys enough for being on. It was a pleasure. I'm so glad I ran into your documentary on Amazon, and I highly recommend people checking it out. It's on Amazon, and do it while before anything interesting or on Amazon gets pulled. Watch it. And so do you guys have any upcoming projects, anything that's going on that you would love to talk about and promote?
Our next movie is called Toxified, and we hope you invite us back.
Oh, absolutely. Are you working with it with Alex?
Of course. We're editing it now. We've got Swiss farmers who all got sick when the cell towers went in. There's an Italian we interviewed that won a Supreme Court case that the cell phone caused his cancer. We've interviewed scientists, all sorts of interesting things. We're going to be talking about toxins because I think, toxins and our diet. I mean, there's a difference between cause and, association and cause, and so I think it's like this big toxic soup, and it's all of these things, and each person has different vulnerabilities. So, toxins, I think, is an important part of this picture.
Absolutely, and also check out your program, Occupy Health, which you guys, if whoever's listening to this podcast, whatever you're using to listen to this, search Occupy Health, check it out. Obviously, if you're a fan of this podcast, you'll be a fan of Susan's show because it sounds like we've had a lot of the same guests. And Alex is, you've done other films outside of this. I mean, this is kind of some new genre. Yeah,
we
right.
Both.
Yeah.
It wasn't like this. We had money, and so but I think, this was a work of love. And I think it's probably the most important thing because it's actually saving lives if people pay attention. And when people go to watch our movie, if they give us a good star rating to compensate for all the people that are attacking us, that'd be a good thing too. I mean, I had a 1-star because they said this movie depressed me because it said sad things.
And one of our competitors busy giving us 1 stars as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does happen. That does happen because I know when I had Dr. Brzezinski on, I immediately got people tweeting me, writing me, telling me that it's pseudoscience and all this stuff. And how little do they know? I've been a huge fan of his forever, so I was well researched in his story. And but it's same thing with when I had Del Bigtree on. Just you get all these people who just attack, and some of them could be paid. In some cases with Brzezinski and Del Bigtree, they have pretty good reason to believe that it's people trying to shut them up and whatnot. But that simple task of just rating the film, please do that, share it. That's really important too. Tell friends about it. I always tell people about this podcast is probably one of the best things you can do is share it, put it on your social media accounts, do all that stuff because you never know who's going to click on it, run into a conversation that could change their lives, or at least get them down that rabbit hole that leads them down some crazy paths to look at things from a different light. So it's super important. So hats off to you guys. Thank you so much for like Alex said, investing so much time in something that isn't a good investment. and that's
thanks to you too, because you're doing the same thing. This is a spiritual thing, trying to get information out there. So thank you very much for what you do. And this, you'll hear a lot more from us because we're not going to stop. And what you're doing, I think, is great.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm the nice thing is that we have a family-owned little construction company, so I have the benefit of not worrying about getting fired or pissing anybody off, and I don't really like construction that much anyway. So if I do get fired, it's not the end of the world. But it's this is really my passion. I think that having these conversations and really, like I always tell people, I'm like, I'm not that interesting. I haven't done anything that interesting, but hopefully I can be the expose you to interesting people who are doing really interesting stuff. And that's your documentary is definitely one of them. And I can't wait to check out the new documentary once it's available. And hopefully you guys have some luck with getting it on Amazon and maybe even Netflix, hopefully, because unfortunately, those companies have kind of become monopolies, and then there's always some fear of YouTube censoring stuff. James Corbett, who I'm a huge fan of and a friend of mine. I mean, there's multiple times I've looked for his videos that I know have millions of views to share with a friend and share with somebody, and I can't find it. And I'm like, I know this. I'm putting in the right title. I'm putting in, this should be coming up. And, there's plenty of cases of that where, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, they're censoring people. The Conspiracy Farm podcast, which are people who've been on my show too, they had a vaccine debate with Del Bigtree and a pro-vaxxer, and that debate got censored on Facebook. And it's just like that type of stuff is,
that's horrible.
It's horrible because people need to let people decide. I mean, you're basically saying people aren't intelligent enough to make their own decisions, so Big Brother's going to make it for you, and that's not the way things should be. People should get all the information so they can make a decision on their own. And if they still decide to go down that wrong path, then at least they got all the information, So so I'm definitely going to check out Occupy Health, and I'm definitely going to stay in touch and hopefully have you guys on again. And hopefully, and thank you so much for being patient. I know this scheduling this was not easy, and everybody's on different schedules, and there's some confusion with when the show should have been, and or whatnot. So I'm glad we finally did it, and it's my pleasure to have you guys on, and it was a real pleasure to talk. And
for your patience, it had to be hard on you. I mean, I was just sitting there going, blah, but we're extremely patient. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I know that, having you guys on will hopefully, if one person listens to it and watches the documentary, then it's worth it, and I think it's really important. And your documentary, to me, it was different. There's a lot of documentaries out there on, big pharma and the food industry and stuff like that. But one thing I loved about you guys, that you guys really went into some of the history of it too. And, like we talked about the Rockefellers and the AMA and the Flex report. So people have an understanding on like, okay, well, if everybody's saying that we used to eat like this and we used to consider this medicine and we don't now, how did it all happen? Because everybody talks about how corrupt Big Pharma is and all that stuff, but nobody really goes into the, what led us here. And you went into that with your documentary, which I loved, because I'm like, this is really important information. You have a better understanding of today and the issues of today if you follow the path backwards and you find out how we got here. So, when I saw that, I'm like, oh, this is so awesome that somebody actually focused on this part of it, because it really is important for people to understand that prior to this, people used vitamins and minerals, and it was quite normal for people to consider that medicine. Now, the only thing we consider medicine is a pill, and you can't
get tax deductions for vitamins. What's that all about?
Yeah, and there
pills, but not vitamins.
And there is a problem with. People say, oh, well, vitamins are unregulated and all this stuff, and there's some truth to that. Okay, but the thing is that if something comes from food, then if your food's not getting regulated, then why should your vitamin? If I buy mecha root, or I buy milk thistle, that comes from plants, then first of all, it's already hard enough to sell something that you can't patent. Like the profit margin's already small to none. So now you're saying you're going to put some regulations on them, like it has to be FDA approved, and they have to also invest in studies. That's ridiculous, And don't get me wrong, there's supplement companies out there that will take advantage of people. They'll sell you a vitamin that doesn't even have the vitamin, or it's some poor quality. And that's the other thing that's really important too. We talked about quality of food, quality of supplements and vitamins are really important too, right? You just don't go to your.
If it says folic acid in it, stay away from it, because if 30% of us don't have a poor MHTFR gene, which means we don't methylate, etc. We can't convert the folic acid to the usable folate. And there's a correlation between the buildup of folic acid and various cancers. There's certain vitamins that like for ALA, I think you've got a right-hand version and a left-hand version. They'll put the wrong one in there so it won't interact with any receptor in the body. You need a company that's got quality control, and there are quite a few of them out there. There have been studies going into various drugstores showing the things that were supposed to be in there or not, and there are some things you didn't want in there that were in there. So and I get the same feeling from supplement companies as I do from drug companies. It's the same feeling when they're trying to push their stuff on us. So we just have to be careful.
One thing that people overlook often is minerals. You need a certain number of minerals every day.
I've got a dentist appointment. I've got to go.
Oh, Sorry, Susan. Hey, well, we'll talk more again in the near future. Keep me updated on the documentary.
Thank you.
I'd love to have.
Go.
Yep. Take care. See you, Alex.
Bye.
Keep in touch. Take care. Bye.